think this has been a really exciting period in the history of the company, and you're right to put it in a historical perspective because it's really, you'd have to go back 15 years to see this much development, this much excitement, and this much change in such a short period of time. You know, every release has something new that's tangible for editors, not just sort of theoretical stuff. It's stuff you can touch and feel when you work. And, you know, I think the company is really a very different company than it was even 2-3 years ago. Avid has changed very dramatically from the Avid of 3, 4, 5 years ago. And you see this everywhere. You know, the software is being aggressively upgraded. There's changes in every release, stuff that you can use that's not abstract or theoretical. And I think unlike at other times in the company's history, they're really listening to editors as opposed to maybe, you know, Avid has to appeal to a lot of different customers, but in this case, there's a lot more attention being paid to what editors need day to day to make movies work. The big difference between the Media Composer and the other applications is that you can make every editorial decision based on moving video. Yes, you can drag things around in the timeline, but you can also JKL play everything. And at the end of the day, I make decisions not based on little squares in the timeline, I make decisions based on the material playing at sound speed. And the Media Composer excels at doing that. Trim mode is the ultimate reason to use a Media Composer. AMA is competing with Final Cut on the QuickTime side. AMA is really more flexible than QuickTime. You know, AMA works with QuickTime now, which is great, but it also works with a bunch of other native formats without having to transcode them to QuickTime first or wrap them in QuickTime. So Avid, having come to this party a little bit late, allows us to do everything. You can choose to have your media be unmanaged, and you know, and that has value in many environments, or you can choose to have it be managed, and you can transcode and play it both ways on the same project. Now that we have AMA, we have a choice, and we can use Avid's, you know, tightly managed media environment, which is mostly what I rely on in feature films and television. Or if we need to access other kinds of media, we can do it through AMA. AMA is very powerful. It's really more powerful than QuickTime because it allows you to work natively with a whole breadth of media types that aren't QuickTime, right? So it's more flexible than QuickTime. It allows the manufacturers to write to the codec, write to the architecture. And so as Avid editors, we have the best of both worlds. We can work unmanaged if we need speed or if we don't want to duplicate our media, and we can work managed and rely on the sort of bulletproof environment that gives us.
How would you compare Avid to other products in terms of being open, and what does this Matrox addition to the family allow you to do?
Well, this is another example of how Avid is such a totally changed company than it was, you know, 5 years ago. A lot of what you're seeing now was unimaginable back then. So the Matrox is a great solution for kind of a person on a lower budget. So for $500, you can have full HD monitoring. You don't have HDIO in the sense you can't come in and out from tape, but a lot of us don't need to do that. So, you know, in my world, you'll have, where we do need to come in and out from tape, we still might have a station that has no tape and doesn't need it and can still look at images on a big screen. And yes, I think Avid is transforming itself into a company that's much more based on standards that other people create, and I think that's all to the good.
Does it make sense that you present more of a finished version of your film as much as possible to the director?
All we do now is get better and better at producing more and more polished material out of what used to be the offline editing room. And, I mean, we're delivering stuff that 20 years ago you would have been very happy to deliver as the final, but now it's just a rough. So yes, the fact that we have real-time audio suite effects, the fact that we have track-based effects, the fact that we have stereo tracks, those are all positive steps forward. I think they're just the beginning of something that gives us more and more of the tool set that you get in Pro Tools. There's a great tendency to treat editing as if it was desktop publishing. So people who are new to the craft want to move little squares around in the timeline, just like you would in Quark Express or InDesign. And I think the more experienced editors think in terms of pictures and sounds and how they cut together, as opposed to seeing little pieces. So my eyes are more up here where the images are and less down here where the timeline is, and I'm not moving little squares around. I'm more working in trim mode than I am in what Avid calls segment mode. You're on the edges of cuts and you're listening and watching those things play at speed to see how things work together. Now, obviously, every editor is doing both of those things, but I think as you mature, you're less in the mode of moving things around. Now, that said, it depends on the material, right? So if you're working in documentaries, you're much more working in segments. If you're working in a montage, you're working in segments and you're rearranging things. So there's a sort of a clip-based metaphor versus a transition-based metaphor. And Avid, among all the applications, does the transition stuff a lot better. Red was, and still is, really the hottest thing. I think the DSLRs are hotter now in terms of buzz. I don't think that's going to change. I think we're going to see these price points go down. We're going to see the quality go up. It's inevitable. It's just going to keep happening. And the beauty of AMA is that it allows the manufacturers to write to the spec and to help allow Media Composer to be native to all these different formats. So it's very future oriented. So, this flavor of the month right now is the Canon DSLRs. The flavor of the month 6 months ago was Red. Red will have new cameras out soon, and they will become the flavor of the month. But what's great about the Media Composer is it doesn't really matter. And we have to be ready to work with all those different formats.
What do you think about this change inside the timeline?
Well, I think it's great. I think that the direct manipulation tools they're the biggest change Avid has made in years. This is something that the company was very afraid to toy with because everybody loved their interaction model so much. You're right, it's much more appealing to a newbie. It lowers the learning curve. It makes the Media Composer more standardized. And I think it does it in a way that's slicker than the competition because the tools are smart. You don't have to select your tool. Your tool self-selects depending on the position of the cursor. It knows what you want to do. I think that's going to become part of every editor's toolkit. It's inevitable. In terms of the technology, this is a very exciting time. We've gone through waves. There's tremendous excitement in the mid-90s when nonlinear editing had its heyday, initial heyday. And then we had this very exciting period when Final Cut came along and there was competition again. And now Avid is very much back in the game and aggressively driving the technology. And at the same time, we have all these cameras. The technology wind that blew through editing in the 90s is now blowing through production. And editing has to respond. So it's created this whole nother level of excitement where there was a period for us where every picture you'd have a different workflow. And then it kind of settled down for a while. And now we're back to this same thing of every picture has a different wrinkle to it. And what's equally exciting is every picture can avail itself of different kinds of editing technology as well. So with that, Avid is basically giving us new tools every 6 months now. So that creates a certain kind of excitement and energy that we can constantly expand our capabilities and our power to shape and polish our work.